At the time of this video's release, my new book, Immigrant Tongues, exploring how languages moved, evolved, and defined us, has been officially released in the USA for one whole day. This book is all about the migrations of languages across our globe, and exploring how we all ended up speaking the languages we do today. If you're a fan of history, geography, or language, then this book would be perfect for you. I seriously hope you pre-ordered it in the build up to this release day, and maybe you're enjoying it right now. But if you're still on the fence about reading this new book of mine, then perhaps this very video could tempt you otherwise. That's because this video is actually an animated and abridged adaptation of a chapter from the book. Specifically, it derives from the chapter Lost in Hungary, Hungarian in Europe, which details how this language travelled thousands of miles to find itself at home in Central Europe, while its closest relatives live much further afield. Anyway, shall we dive into it? Thanks to a language migration in the 9th century, a non-Indo-European tongue found itself not only in Europe, but more or less slap bang in the middle of the continent. This was none other than the tongue of Hungarian, found in the nation of Hungary. A simple glance of the lexicon of Hungarian makes it abundantly clear that this tongue has little to no relation to its neighbours. An example I find incredible is their name for the nation of Italy. In the surrounding languages of Romanian, Slovenian and German, the boot-shaped nation is called Italian, Italia and Italian, respectively. All three of these languages are from different branches of the Indo-European family. If Hungarian was also part of this happy little family, then its name for Italy would sound similar too. Languages of geographic closeness also tend to sound alike regardless of familial ties. Of course, this isn't the case. The Hungarian name is instead the mouthful of Olaszország, which sounds nothing like any of the other names for Italy. Even the Hungarian name for Hungary sounds nothing like the name Hungary. Its native name is instead Magyarország. Hungarian, however, is not a language isolate, but rather a black sheep that has been separated from the rest of its flock. The rest of its flock are the fellow members of the Uralic language family. This is a language family that has its initial origins far away from the lands that now use these tongues. The Uralic family of languages is thought to have been conceived somewhere in the Ural Mountains, a range now housed in Russia. They are often used as a natural border of sorts between European Russia and Asian Russia, as well as Europe and Asia as a whole. Around the Ural Mountains today, Uralic languages are still spoken, but in no large numbers. They are minority languages in Russia. This includes the Samoyedic and Permic languages. These are distant cousins of Hungarian. The Uralic languages of Munsi and Kunti can also be found in the Urals. What makes Munsi and Kunti of so much interest to us is the fact that they're the closest relatives of Hungarian, as these three languages all are the Ugric branch of the Uralic language family. Uralic languages have thrived best away from their homelands, like a student leaving the nest to find their real selves at university. Hungarian is the most widely spoken of the Uralic languages with 17 million speakers. However, it is not the only Uralic language to find the land of its own in Europe. Two branches of Uralic languages have found themselves at home in some of the northernmost points of Europe. The Sami branch contains the many Sami dialects, which populate the sparse wilderness of the northern tips of the Nordic countries. And then there's also the Baltic Finnic branch. This is the branch that houses the other two most widely spoken Uralic languages, the ones that have come to represent entire nations, as opposed to just small pockets of people. It is in this branch we find the languages of Estonian and Finnish, spoken in the nations of Estonia and Finland, respectively. This paints a picture of the Uralic family all nestled somewhat close to one another, in northern Europe and nearby Asian Russia. This is where the rest of Hungarian's flock grazes, and we can start to understand just how far Hungarian has wandered from its paddock. Hungarian is not just distant from its relatives geographically. These languages have been split for a huge amount of time too. The initial split of Proto-Uralic is thought to have occurred over 4,000 years ago. For context, the split in, say, the Romance branch of Indo-European is thought to have happened around 2,000 years ago, if that. This has created varying degrees of mutual intelligibility between these languages, especially in regards to the three most prominent ones, Hungarian, Finnish, and Estonian. Take the word for dog in each of these languages, kutya koira, and kua in Hungarian, Estonian, and Finnish respectively. All three versions of this word for our best friends are similar to one another in their spelling and pronunciation. Granted, they aren't identical, but you can clearly see a relationship between them. On the other hand, we have their words for cat. Finnish and Estonian go with kissa and kas, which are alike, while Hungarian goes with mukska, which isn't particularly in line with its Uralic siblings. On the whole, Finnish and Estonian are a lot more alike. Hungarian has been very much evolving in its own way. A Finn in Budapest would still need to pack a phrase book. The difference in these languages would not have been as prominent in the past. In fact, they would have been the exact same language. Proto-Uralic is believed to have originated around 8,000 years ago in the Ural Mountains. After 4,000 years of living together, these speakers decided to go their separate ways. One group would go on to become the Finnish and the Estonians, with some of those migrating even further and becoming the Sami speakers. Those who would become the Hungarians, or Magyars, went in a completely different direction. Oddly enough, at first they travelled eastward, finding themselves on the western edges of Siberia, a cold and inhospitable part of the world. They relocated here around the start of the AD era, and here they struggled, noticeably against the vicious and brutal Huns, one of history's most infamous tribes, and people you wouldn't want to be on the bad side of. Despite the similarities in their names, the Hungarians and the Huns are not the same people. It's just a coincidence. The Huns drove these migrants out of Siberia. By the time of this exile, the language they spoke had already changed. It was around 1000 BC that it's thought the Proto-Uralic these people spoke started to shift into the first stage of Hungarian. These people needed a new home, and the quest to find one would take centuries. The early Hungarian speakers, who left their home in the Ural Mountains and found themselves banished from Siberia, realized that traveling eastward was no longer a viable option. With a barren wasteland to their north and south, they were only left with one option. Step by step, they travelled westward. What aided these travels was the mighty Eurasian steppe, a huge spread of flat, easily traversable land which spans from modern China to Hungary. This navigable land has, throughout history, helped many peoples come and go between Europe and Asia with ease. They went further westward than any Uralic speaker had gone before, and finally, after generations of migration, in the late 9th century AD, they stumbled upon somewhere that could make an exquisite home. The Carpathian Basin is a huge area of land in the southeast of Central Europe. It's a relatively flat part of the continent, bordered by various mountain ranges, including the Carpathian Mountains, where its name derives from. It's full of great farmable land, a manageable climate, and ample rivers. It would have been a suitable home for any band of wanderers. Today, the majority of Hungary lies within this Carpathian Basin, so a slight spoiler I suppose. Before the land belonged to the Hungarians, many others and their languages called this land home. While under the rule of Rome, it went by the name of Pannonia. In the 6th century, after the fall of Western Rome, a group named the Avars called it their home too. They were a Turkic people with their own migration story, and would have spoken a language somewhat similar to that of modern Turkish. Just prior to the land coming under the claim of the Hungarians/Magyars, it did not belong to one single power. It was instead being fought over by three powers. The First Bulgarian Empire, emanating from Bulgaria, the Kingdom of East Francia, which had a majority of their land in what is now Eastern Germany, and Great Moravia, which was based in modern Czechia. It was these three empires that fought for the basin and its geographical importance during the late 9th century. Also around this time, the Hungarians had immigrated far enough west to find themselves on the cusp of this land. They did not plunge straight into the fray, turning things into a fatal four-way in wrestling parlance. Their conquering of this land came in stages. At first, Hungarian mercenaries were hired by the Bulgarians, East Franks, and Moravians to fight on their behalf. Little did these empires know that, in doing so, they were just giving the Hungarians a good idea of the lay of the land, and it was land they wanted. On the outside looking in, the Hungarians got to work on planning their conquest. and that conquest went into motion properly in 894. This was in the midst of those three kingdoms duking it out. Beyond these three raging for the land, it was relatively sparsely populated, which made things easy for the Hungarians to claim the land fairly swiftly with their military might. The Bulgarians, East Franks, and Moravians were usurped by the Hungarians, who travelled far from their home in the Ural Mountains. By 900, the basin was firmly under Hungarian control. The people whose ancestors were ousted by the Huns some millennia ago were now the ones doing the ousting. This, of course, occurred to the chagrin of those empires who spent decades fighting over it before the Hungarians rocked up. From here, the basin has stayed under Hungarian control, evolving into the Kingdom of Hungary in around 1000, and eventually merging into the famous dual monarchy of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, before becoming the nation it is today. During all that time, their language of Hungarian shifted too. Their tongue continued to evolve in its own unique way, cut off from its relatives up in the Baltic. Modern Hungarian finally emerged in the 18th century. This shows us just how far away geographically and time-wise Hungarian has been away from the rest of its Uralic family. The distance alone can explain to us why the language is so different from its cousins, like Finnish and Estonian. Yet, the Uralic language of Hungarian hasn't turned its nose up to its Indo-European neighbours completely. Its lexicon now contains words from the languages it shares borders with. The Hungarian word for mushroom, gomba, was acquired via their Slavic-speaking friends of Slovenia to their southwest, who use gorba as their name for Mario's favourite power-up. Finnish meanwhile goes with the Holy Uralic sini as their word for the fungus. Even Romanian and their Romance language has inspired the language of Hungary. The Romanian term for bag, ponga, is more or less identical to the Hungarian term of ponga too. The Uralic Estonian favour the simple word of kot as their name for a bag. The most interesting influence on Hungarian, however, is probably the Turkish language. These two nations have a very closely shared history with one another, having been allies and enemies at various times over history. This means that Hungarian words have come from Turkish roots too. For example, they both share the same word for the humble tray, tepsi. Turkish and Hungarian are more similar than just sharing a lexicon, it seems. Both languages have similar grammars and other features. In fact, they are so alike that, for some time, many linguists believe that Turkish was actually another language in the Uralic family. Today, however, we know now that isn't the case. Like I said up top, Hungarian has gone on an incredible journey to arrive in the land it now calls home. And that is just one of the language journeys covered in this book. It also goes into great detail about how many other languages not only arrived in new places, but how they changed and adapted in their new homes, all coming together to create a history of the world told through language migrations. Immigrant Tongues is now available to purchase in the United States, and there's still a little bit of a wait for the wider world. There'll be links down below where you can order your own copy today, and I seriously hope you will enjoy this new book of mine. Name Explained depends on viewers like yourself supporting the channel financially on Patreon, so a huge thank you to everyone who does. Donating just $1 a month helps the channel amazingly and gets you bonuses including ad-free videos, exclusive content, the power to request ideas to be made into actual Name Explain videos, and your name at the end of the video with all these awesome people. Visit patreon.com/NameExplain or click the link down below to find out how you too can support the channel. Thank you. Thanks for reaching the end of the video. Why not watch another and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Name Explain. You can find myself on Instagram where I'm NameExplainYT, and join the Facebook group Friends of Name Explain to talk with myself and other name nerds. All that will be linked down below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and once again, thank you all so much.